It's sometime around 3 in the morning. The house is completely silent, the lights are off, everyone is asleep, and somewhere in the darkness, your dog is awake. Not pacing around the room, not scratching the door, not asking to go outside, just sitting there. Maybe at the edge of the bed, maybe near the doorway, maybe with their chin resting quietly on the mattress. And their eyes are open, watching you. If you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and caught your dog staring at you while you sleep, you probably assume the same thing most owners do. Maybe they're waiting for breakfast. Maybe they heard a sound outside. Maybe dogs just don't sleep as deeply as we do. It sounds like a simple explanation. But behavioral science tells a very different story. Because when a dog quietly watches their owner sleep, they may be doing something far older than domestication itself. They may be performing a behavior rooted in pack vigilance, emotional attachment, and one of the deepest bonds animals have ever formed with humans. Most people assume dogs stare at their owners at night for simple reasons: hunger, boredom, or the hope that if they stay awake long enough, morning will arrive faster. But when researchers actually began studying nighttime canine behavior, they discovered something interesting. Dogs don't simply wake up randomly during the night. They wake up and check their environment. More specifically, they check the status of their social group. And in most homes, that social group revolves around one central figure: you. Sleep studies on domestic dogs show that their sleep cycles are shorter and lighter than those of humans. While we may remain in deep sleep for long stretches, dogs cycle between light sleep and brief alert periods throughout the night. During these brief awakenings, many dogs perform what behavioral scientists call social referencing. They visually confirm that the important members of their group are still present, safe, and predictable. This is why some dogs will briefly lift their head, look toward the bed, and then settle back down. But when a dog sits and watches you for longer periods, something deeper is often happening. Because to the canine brain, you are not just another individual in the house, you are the emotional anchor of their environment. And the moment you fall asleep, the dynamic of the pack changes. The leader is no longer actively aware of the surroundings, which means, in many dogs' minds, someone else needs to be. That instinct is not random, it's written deep into the psychology of social animals. And to understand why, we need to look at what modern science has discovered about the way dogs bond with humans at the neurological level. For decades, scientists assumed the relationship between dogs and humans was mostly based on training and food rewards. But over the past 20 years, research has revealed something far more profound. Dogs don't just live with humans. They form attachment bonds that closely resemble the emotional bonds between human parents and children. One of the most influential studies on this topic was conducted at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, a leading center for canine cognition research. In a controlled experiment, researchers observed how dogs behaved when their owners were resting or inactive nearby. The scientists monitored gaze behavior, body orientation, and stress indicators in more than 50 domesticated dogs placed in unfamiliar environments with their owners. What they found was remarkable. When the owner appeared calm or asleep, many dogs shifted into what researchers described as monitoring behavior. Instead of wandering or disengaging, the dogs frequently positioned themselves where they could visually observe the owner. Even more interesting, dogs that had stronger attachment scores, measured through behavioral tests similar to the human strange situation test used with infants, showed significantly higher levels of this quiet observation behavior. In other words, the dogs most emotionally bonded to their owners were also the most likely to watch them closely during vulnerable moments, such as sleep. Another study from Kyoto University in 2015 examined how dogs use eye contact to regulate social relationships with humans. Researchers discovered that prolonged gaze between dogs and owners triggered measurable increases in oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, in both species. This hormone plays a critical role in social trust and emotional attachment, which means when your dog quietly watches you sleep, that behavior may not simply be curiosity. It may be part of a bonding system built directly into their brain chemistry. But the story goes even deeper. Because behind that calm gaze lies a powerful neurological mechanism that links your dog's emotional state directly to your presence. And that mechanism begins with a hormone that transformed the relationship between humans and dogs forever. To understand what's happening in your dog's mind when they quietly watch you sleep, we need to look at the chemistry of attachment. Because the bond between humans and dogs is not just emotional, it is biological. When dogs interact with their owners, through eye contact, physical touch, or even simply resting nearby, their brains release a powerful hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is often referred to as the bonding hormone. It is the same chemical that strengthens the connection between parents and infants, between close partners, and between members of tightly bonded social groups. In dogs, oxytocin plays a similar role. Studies conducted by researchers at Azabu University in Japan measured oxytocin levels in both dogs and their owners during periods of prolonged eye contact. The results showed that when dogs gazed at their owners, oxytocin levels increased in both the human and the dog. In other words, the act of looking at you literally strengthens the emotional bond between you and your dog. But the effect becomes even more interesting during sleep. When you fall asleep, your body enters cycles of reduced awareness. Your breathing slows, your movements decrease. From a neurological perspective, you are in a more vulnerable state. Dogs are extremely sensitive to these physiological changes. Their hearing detects subtle shifts in breathing patterns. Their sense of smell can detect hormonal fluctuations. Their brains constantly monitor the safety and stability of their environment. So when your dog wakes during the night and looks toward you, their brain is performing a rapid assessment. Are you safe? Are you still there? Is the social structure of the group stable? If everything appears normal, you're breathing steady, your body relaxed, the dog's brain experiences a small release of calming neurochemicals. The environment is safe, and the dog can relax again. But this monitoring behavior does not come only from modern bonding hormones. It comes from something far older, an evolutionary instinct that developed long before dogs ever slept beside human beds. Long before dogs slept on human beds, their ancestors slept in something very different. A pack. Wolves, the closest living relatives of domestic dogs, evolved in environments where nighttime was one of the most dangerous periods of the day. Visibility was low. Predators moved silently. Rival packs could approach without warning. Because of this, wolf packs developed a survival strategy that behavioral ecologists sometimes describe as distributed vigilance. Not every member of the pack sleeps deeply at the same time. Instead, individuals cycle between light sleep and alert observation throughout the night. One wolf may rest, while another remains semi-aware of sounds, movement, and environmental changes. Then the roles shift. This system dramatically increases survival, because the pack always has someone paying attention. Even today, studies of wild wolves show that they frequently sleep in positions that allow them to monitor the pack and their surroundings. Wolves near the edges of the group often wake first and scan the environment before returning to rest. Domestic dogs may live in homes instead of forests, but the underlying brain architecture is still there. Your dog's mind still operates with the logic of a social survival animal. And in that mental model, the household is not just a group of individuals sharing a space, it is a pack structure. Within that structure, humans occupy a very unusual role. You control food, you control movement, you control territory. To the canine brain, that combination places you very close to the position of primary social leader. Which means when you fall asleep, something unusual happens in the dog's perception of the pack. The most important member of the group becomes temporarily unaware of the environment. From an evolutionary standpoint, that is exactly the moment when someone else should be alert. So when your dog quietly lifts their head and watches you sleep, they may not simply be awake. They may be performing a role that once protected entire packs from danger. A silent night watch. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because not every dog who watches their owner sleep is acting out of protection. And in some cases, this behavior can reveal something owners often overlook. At first glance, the idea that your dog is quietly keeping watch over you sounds comforting, and sometimes that interpretation is correct. But behavioral researchers have discovered that nighttime monitoring behavior can also come from a very different psychological place. Not vigilance, but hyper-attachment. In a study conducted by canine behavior specialists at the University of Lincoln in the United Kingdom, researchers examined dogs that displayed unusually persistent monitoring of their owners, including following them constantly, watching them closely during rest, and becoming restless when visual contact was lost. The researchers studied more than 90 dogs with varying attachment profiles. What they discovered was surprising. Dogs that showed secure attachment tended to check on their owners briefly and then relax. But dogs that scored higher on anxious attachment scales behaved differently. These dogs watched their owners for longer periods, repositioned themselves to maintain constant visual contact, and often struggled to settle if the owner moved or disappeared from view. In other words, the behavior looked almost identical on the surface, a dog quietly watching their owner. But the emotional motivation underneath could be completely different. One dog might be calmly monitoring the environment. Another might be trying to reassure itself that its primary attachment figure has not disappeared. Researchers call this attachment surveillance behavior. And it's especially common in dogs that are extremely bonded to one person. Interestingly, these dogs often display other subtle signs during the day, sitting unusually close, following their owner from room to room, or positioning themselves where they can maintain visual awareness of the owner's movements. None of this necessarily means something is wrong, but it does reveal something important. Your dog's brain is constantly trying to answer one question: is my person still here? And that brings us to the part of this behavior that many owners completely miss, because sometimes the way a dog watches you at night can quietly signal something deeper about how secure they feel when you're not fully present. So how can you tell the difference? How do you know whether your dog watching you sleep is a calm instinct or a quiet sign of anxiety? Behavioral psychologists often look for one key factor: what happens after the dog checks on you? Dogs with secure attachment usually follow a simple pattern. They wake briefly, they look toward you, they confirm that everything is normal, then they relax and fall back asleep. Their body language remains loose, their breathing slows again, their muscles soften, the check-in is quick. The environment feels safe. But dogs experiencing attachment insecurity often behave differently. Instead of settling again, they may continue watching you for extended periods. Some reposition themselves repeatedly so they can maintain visual contact. Others move closer to the bed or physically touch their owner while sleeping. Some even wake frequently throughout the night, not because of noise, but because their brain keeps asking the same question: is my person still here? This kind of hyper-awareness is not necessarily a serious behavioral problem. Many highly bonded dogs show mild versions of it. But when the behavior becomes constant, following you everywhere, becoming distressed when doors close, struggling to relax when you leave, it can indicate the early stages of separation-related anxiety. And here's the important insight most owners miss. Dogs don't experience attachment the way humans describe it. They experience it through predictability. A predictable owner creates a stable emotional environment. Feeding routines, sleep routines, daily movement patterns. These signals tell the dog that the social world is stable, which means sometimes the most reassuring thing you can give your dog is not extra attention. It's consistency. A consistent routine tells your dog something powerful. The pack is stable, and stable packs are safe. But once you understand that, the moment when your dog quietly watches you at night begins to look very different. Because that behavior may be revealing something extraordinary about how your dog sees you. So let's return to that moment in the middle of the night. The house is quiet, the lights are off, you're asleep, completely unaware of the world around you. And somewhere nearby, your dog is awake for a moment. They lift their head, they look toward the bed, they watch your breathing rise and fall. To us, sleep is a time when nothing is happening. But to a dog, that quiet moment can mean something else entirely. It's a moment when the most important member of their world becomes temporarily still, temporarily silent, temporarily vulnerable. And their instinct, shaped by evolution, reinforced by brain chemistry, and strengthened by emotional attachment, is to check, just to make sure everything is still okay. And when they see you there, calm, breathing, safe, their brain relaxes, the environment is stable, the pack is together, and they can finally close their eyes again. That quiet glance in the dark may last only a few seconds, but inside the mind of your dog it carries a powerful meaning. You are not just the person who feeds them. You are not just the person who walks them. You are the center of their social world. And sometimes, while you sleep, they're simply making sure that world is still there. If you've ever woken up and caught your dog quietly watching you at night, you're not alone. Tell us in the comments, what does your dog do while you're sleeping? And if you're curious about the hidden psychology behind other everyday dog behaviors, make sure to subscribe. Because in the next video, we're going to explore another strange habit many dogs share: why some dogs insist on sleeping pressed against their owners, and what that reveals about trust, attachment, and emotional security.